All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white light straight out into your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we got a little bit of a potpourri, as we sometimes do. It's a Sunday afternoon if this comes out the same day, but we decided we didn't do a social one this week. But we might have to do Wheel of Time on Wednesday this week. So we're going ahead and throwing this one in. I just smoked an amazing brisket, the best brisket ever. Uh, uh, Maybe not, but it was delicious. And I've got a little bit of politics based on the assassination attempt plus the Biden stuff, which I mean, slow news week, right? And then Kamala Harris coming in, and so there's going to be a quick part on that, and then we're going to talk what Heath wanted to talk about, where he wanted to go into based on a Laura Southern interview on Triggernometry, but basically, I think you wanted to rail on conservatives a little bit on what the trad wife phenomenon
A little
is.
bit, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then we've got some spin-offs from all that. So these are far-reaching topics because you can't talk relationships without talking everything realistically.
hmm
So I think he wanted my input on some of that, and we'll see what his thoughts are. So let's start with the politics because that's the least interesting part. What I wanted to go into, and we talk about this a lot on our cast, is it's really hard to like emotionally trigger me, but there's one thing that pisses me off more than a lot of other things. Two things that piss me off. Uh, Being blamed for something you didn't do, and then the explanation for the blame being stupid. Because we've all been in a lot of relationships, and we're two guys, so I'm going to say this from a guy perspective, but females can probably identify as well. Actually, the Lauren Southern interview actually hits on this a lot. You get blamed for things you didn't do. It's hard to have an argument or a discussion that doesn't evolve into an argument when the premise of it is a lie. But then when I get to the meat and potatoes of where that came from, and I'm like, you now not only are you calling me a liar, but to do this, I would have had to be stupid. And now you're calling me dumb. And I hate being called dumb. If I do have a sensitive spot, I do pride myself in not being dumb for the most
Yeah.
part.
Because there's a
And
difference between being wrong and being dumb.
yeah,
Wrong means you there was a misstep somewhere along your train of logic, or you were working with bad data or faulty assumptions, and but
hmm
that doesn't mean you're dumb because you just didn't think things through properly for one reason or another.
yeah. So not only are you calling me crooked, but the reason you know about it is because I was stupid in the process. That to me actually is a little bit of a trigger, and it's kind of a deal breaker in a relationship with me, whether it's a friend or
hmm
partner or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I'm not dumb. And all of this stuff that's happening in the last few weeks with, Secret Service stuff, and then the DNC coming up, but the Biden stepping out and everything. Those of us that aren't dumb are not surprised.
hmm
And those of us that aren't dumb are also not giving in to the lies. And you're going to rail on the conservatives here in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and rail on the other side that used to be my side 20 years ago, right? So let's go into the first story here. I'm bringing receipts. Okay, so after the assassination attempt, this was one of the big talking points in the name of unity, and I put in air quotes if you're just listening. Democrats pull campaign ads after Trump rally shooting. They said, "Oh, we're gonna $50 million ad blitz. We're gonna pull because we don't want to be divisive right now." But if you're following along, what happened right before that was, oh, stupid ads covering the headline. Come on, how do you get these ads out of the way? Here we go. Donors to hold 90 million in pledges if Biden remains on ticket. This is right before all of the other events happened. And we've got more receipts. Here's New York Post. Democrat donors are withholding 90 million to largest pro-Biden super PAC if he stays on ticket. So they didn't have the advertising money already. Donors withhold 90 million promised for Biden in the latest debate. So his withholding the advertising just in the name of unity just so happens to correlate with the fact that they took the money for the advertising to begin with. And then we get the next one. Okay, so why did the so just asking you, why did the donors withhold the money based on
Oh,
those headlines?
based on the headlines, plus based on what I've heard guys like James Carville saying is they knew he couldn't win.
Well, here's the headline right here. Pro Biden super PAC if he stays on ticket.
Yeah.
So they're withholding the money because he refused to leave.
Hmm.
Okay, so he finally does leave. And what do we have? A pretty dang close approximation to that amount of money coming in record breaking overnight for Kamala Harris. This is the exact same damn money, is what it is. You know, call me a liar, call me all kinds of stuff, but don't call me stupid. It's the same damn money that they weren't getting. If he didn't pull out, he pulls out, the money all of a sudden comes in. This is not new money. This is not a grassroots effort. They didn't have time for a grassroots effort. You know,
So it's a double lie because it's, you know, now it's being, oh my gosh, look at this huge boost in fundraising for Kamala. The party loves her, the base loves her, the donors love her. No, that was money that was already earmarked. Basically, it was on hold so long as
mm-hmm,
Biden was on the ticket. And secondarily, originally, look how great we are because we're not gonna, put out any attack ads in this difficult time. No, you didn't have the money because it was being withheld. You
mm-hmm.
a-holes.
Yeah. So my big issue with that side of the aisle, well, I mean, I've been always a little bit against the two-party system to begin with, but that specific side of the aisle in the last 20 years or so, they treat you like you're an idiot. And people are coming around to that. AOC fought this right away. I gave her a little credit last time we talked social that she even was talking sense. And all of a sudden, this institution is talking sense. Let's go to the Twix
Oh,
here.
jeez.
Let's go to the Twix. Black Lives Matter. Sunday, Joe Biden drops out. Kamala Harris announces campaign with Biden endorsement. Kamala Harris says she is going to work hard to earn the nomination. Kamala Harris makes calls to party delegates. Monday, for those that can't see this, Kamala Harris continues making the calls to party delegates. Kamala Harris makes two public speeches. AP announces Kamala Harris has secured enough delegates to be the Democratic nominee. Kamala Harris releases this statement, noting she has worked hard to go and earn this nomination as promised. That's Monday night. 24-hour process of talking to party bosses is not democratic, nor is it a process Democrats should be proud of. We do not live in a dictatorship. Delegates are not oligarchs. This is from Black Lives Matter, their official Twitter account. And it's also on their official website. So you don't have the backing you say you do because the biggest people involved are saying, no, we didn't agree to this. And uh, I think that carries weight, not because I respect Black Lives Matter, but if they were everything we hate about them, they would be saying, ooh, black woman. And it would have stopped there. There would have been no more needed. But now they're saying, no, no, this was a rigged process because they know she's establishment. She is not just black woman. They know how she came to power, sucking cock, okay? Not being qualified for the job. They know all of these things. And I think in their moment of clarity right now, they're saying, this is bad for us because Obama was great because he earned his way up for whatever you think about him.
Mm-hmm.
He still rose. He was the cream of the crop of that time in that party, uh, checking all the boxes, but also having the
Yeah.
ability.
It seems like a fait accompli because how could you not nominate the first black president? Yes, I'm using air quotes for that. I might get into that later, but how could you not nominate the first, legitimate guy with a real chance? Because yes, Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson had run on the Democratic primaries before. They were never a realistic chance in the national election. But, you know, take yourself back to 2007, 2008. Hillary was the presumptive nominee. It was her turn. She had done her job in protecting Bill, in securing that New York Senate seat, in all these other things. She was it. He, both with his oratory, his campaigning, and his political machinery, that's the sausage making part of it that people don't care about, or don't want to know about. But he came from a place where he had learned and developed a very effective political machine that was able to execute a ground game that basically upset the favorite.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah, and,
so,
and this is right to begin where I started this conversation. Call him anything you want. Don't call him stupid.
well, and that is
Yeah.
actually something. Um, I little vodka came out my nose when I heard him say this, but the other day, Day said to absolutely in public as your ad campaign, mock Kamala, because she is totally cringe. She is totally mockable. And as you said, we all know how she got to where she got. However, don't underestimate her as a politician,
Hmm.
because something to keep in mind while you're mocking her for how she got into her position, all those men she let get on top of her so she could climb the political ladder, who's on top now?
Hmm.
So don't underestimate her as an utterly shameless politician.
Yeah, and from what I understand, she's also is a very adept prosecutor. So if you're the other side, whether it's RFK or Trump, you need to make sure she never ends up in that role in the debate process, in the
Yeah,
advertising
yeah.
process. You need to put her on the defensive because she does not answer questions well. But apparently she can formulate questions well. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
entirely different skill set. But again, don't treat us like we're stupid, but also don't treat them like they're stupid. No, even her little escapades to get power, those were calculated.
Yeah.
That's not dumb. People make fun of, we go to Peaks or whatever, and there's one gal that works there, and she drives a Corvette and basically has her rent paid every month and everything. And you try to have an intellectual conversation with her, she's not all there. But at the same time, she's smart enough to have her rent paid for, to drive a Corvette, to do
Mm-hmm.
all of these things with minimal work. Who's the dumb one? We're out here struggling trying to make ends meet, and she's got it all figured out. Different kinds of smart, man. Different kinds
Mm-hmm.
of smart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, where was I gonna go with this?
I really didn't have much more than the surface level there because don't treat us like you're dumb, people. And don't be dumb. Don't listen to this stuff. Don't fall for the headline. Look at the whole trail.
yeah, I remember the other infuriating thing about all of this is, um, and Charles C.W. Cook, I've mentioned him before. He's a editor in chief at National Review, and he's great fun to listen to because he's got such a sophisticated British accent, and then he'll go off on these tangents about how great NASCAR is, um, which uh, great comedy is incongruity. And so listening to him talk about NASCAR or his gun collection, or how American football is superior to soccer because soccer is, I think I've said this before, soccer is a series of jazz solos. Football is an orchestra. Football is a symphony, because what the left guard is doing matters, even though if it's you know a play going totally the other direction, because it all comes together. as one, but he had a great article on National Review last week, I think it was, of hey, for a split second there, we actually had a national media after the debate, and the media was actually asking questions. And he made the point that we've made, which was, first of all, if this is actually a surprise to you, media members, then you should all resign because you're terrible at your job.
Mm-hmm.
More likely, it's not a surprise to you, which means you should all resign because you're liars. You're committing fraud because you are ostensibly reporters. You are ostensibly standing on the street corner, observing what happens, and then telling people who weren't there what happened. And you're not doing that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and this lends you to wonder why the big Kamala push now, because even in
mm,
that post debate time, they were like he needs to step aside, but they were talking about Gavin Newsom and
mm,
Whitmer and Michelle Obama and all of these other people. Nobody was talking about Kamala, and Kamala was like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm here. What about me? What about me?"
well,
And then all of a sudden everybody fell in lockstep.
yes.
First of all, that that speech he gave, if you've ever watched a hostage video, that was a hostage video. He never looked at the camera once. He was reading something up in this direction,
Mm,
and I would there was somebody with something threatening in the way. We have an argument between Hunter and Jill before that, and personally, if I'm going to inject something, Hunter can be bought. Jill loved the attention, and
power, yeah.
she was probably trying to keep Biden there, and Hunter was like, no, let's see reasonable things here. They're coming after us. We have this and this and this we need to protect, and we can protect it if he bows out now. So
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the argument that happened, because for all his faults, Hunter was very practical. He
He was the money guy.
he was the money guy, and he's trying to protect the rest of the family, where she was really drunk on this power
Mm-hmm.
that was going on. So I can see that being the argument going into this, and Joe himself was raging for that week that he was having COVID.
All right. Well, there's an interesting tidbit to that I'll get to in just a second. But the main point of Cook's article was, um, you know, maybe you might want to consider continuing to do your job because Joe Biden is still the president for 6 more months. And perhaps we should be asking, is he fit for that office? And since he's clearly not, from what we have seen ad nauseum, who's actually running the frickin' country? Because that's something the American people might want to know. All right, so here's the hostage video. Interesting tidbit. And I didn't know about this until my brother sent me a text of, remember that there was this strange period of time where we did not see the president of the United States for like 5 or 6 days.
Hmm.
No one saw him. And so there are wild conspiracy theories everywhere. And I didn't know that what precipitated that was him leaving that Las Vegas fundraiser early.
Hmm.
And all these stories started to come out that this wasn't COVID. It was announced later that he had COVID because it was
Yeah,
some kind of
well,
medical emergency that was more serious than
yeah,
that.
and here's again, don't treat us like we're stupid. Theme of the day today, we rushed to isolation.
Mm,
You don't rush to isolation. Once you're on the plane alone, you're isolated.
mhm.
They rushed to some sort of medical facility, which was what, Johns Hopkins? They didn't even go to the usual.
I think so.
Yeah. So the theory, what I'm seeing floating around is, because there's some bruising on his face or whatever, is he had a mini stroke and fell and hit his head.
Mm,
Which, this is actually direct experience. My grandfather was 98 years old and still farming up until he fell and hit his head.
mm,
And in 3 weeks, he was unrecognizable as a person because he was in a bed in a wheelchair.
yeah.
And that was the least activity for 3 weeks he's had in his entire 98-year life.
Yeah, my
And
grandpa was the same. Once he was, we knew it wasn't great when he had to start using a walker pretty much all the time because he was always so active, well into his 70s. But then when it got bad is when I visited him and he was in a wheelchair in the VA, and I knew, oh crap, it's not long now. And it was like 6 months after that.
Well,
that he
a
was
little
wheelchair
little
bound.
shout out to those good genetics. He was older than Biden when his tractor ran over him. And he got up and walked back to the house, puked up a pint of blood, and said, "Mama, I think I actually need to go to the hospital." And and they stitched him back together, and he farmed for another 15 years. So
That's them, that good Texas Pollock
yeah,
strength training
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Um,
Don't wear overalls on a tractor. That's what I learned from that because apparently the
they get
string from
caught.
it caught
Yeah, yeah.
the gear. Yeah.
So according to Jordan Chechtel, who is, I know he has done work for the Blaze. I think he's an independent journalist and has written for other places as well. He got onto this story and was citing multiple sources uh, from from state and local police who were part of the detail in Vegas, and that's where the story started to come out that this was not normal. This was a serious emergency, and that initially they were on their way to they were told to make a route to the hospital, and then that order was changed to make a route to the airport, and they sped him to the airport, got him back on Air Force One, and according to some sources, were flying. They made that flight way faster than is normal,
Yeah,
and
someone
according to
from I think
some,
Daily Mail or something, they said it
they
was flying
was
so fast they were
was shaking.
scared for their
Yeah,
life. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, um, part of that reporting from Shechtel is that also, according to, this is part supposition on his part and part people in the Democrat machine, is that that was either that was a bridge too far, that whatever that incident was, whatever that health scare was, and or it was an opportunity, and that is why we didn't see him for 5 or 6 days, because remember, the announcement that he was dropping out was a statement, was a written statement issued by the White House.
Hmm.
So the scuttlebutt, the conspiracy theory is that finally the powers that be, primarily the Obamas here is who we're talking about, decided that's it, Joe's done. You
Yeah,
know,
I hate to say the
I'm
Obama
issuing
right
the
away
code red.
because Barack was very hesitant to back Kamala. And that's there were people that jumped right in line, like the Clintons, because everybody thought Hillary would be the next one. And it was it was surprising that she jumped right away in the
Mm-hmm.
Harris bandwagon. And so, but Obama, well, his wife endorsed Kamala early, but he held back for a while. And so to say the Obamas, I'm just going to say the machine, and I think there's monkey wrenches in the machine right now.
Well,
And
again, part of the speculation scuttlebutt is, and now this was reported. I don't remember if I brought up the article, but I think I mentioned this before the debate or in our debate coverage, that it was interesting that right before the debate came out, a story came out on, I believe, Axios, which is a far left site, about how Michelle Obama hates the Bidens,
mm,
like personally and viscerally, primarily Jill, and it stems in part from an incident. The older son Bo, when he was dying of cancer, supposedly Jill Biden refused the priest access because they're ostensibly Catholic, and the family priest showed up to give last rites to Bo, and Jill told him to go away, and that was to Michelle a sign that these are terrible people.
well, and what people don't know is Bo isn't Jill's son.
Mm-hmm,
She was his babysitter.
mm-hmm,
So the 14-year-old babysitter ending up with
mm-hmm.
the guy after his wife died, it's already suspect enough. But yeah, these are not her kids. And but no, so back to Kamala, we get this push behind her, but some people held back, and it was definitely being held back before they just really couldn't cover for Biden anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I realistically, I bet you they went to everybody else but Kamala and people like Newsom, and I think Whitmer kept making pushes to get delegates,
She
but
was clearly trying to get herself in the
she was
conversation.
trying,
Yeah.
but all the other people that were out there, Michelle and and Newsom, and even some people I've never even heard of. I bet you they said, you know what, this is a sacrifice, man. I'm gonna wait till
There's
2028.
not enough time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's not enough time. I would be damaged goods if I did it now. And Robert Barnes had a good point because he was talking. He knows Obama pretty well, and he's worked against him in a lot of cases, but also with him with a lot of stuff. And he's like, this is what Obama's doing right now. He's trying to pull somebody in from left field
Mm.
because their best chance is someone like, and he brought up the name he brought forward was The Rock. He said some celebrity that everybody loves to
Tom
come
Hanks. That
in.
name's been floated out before.
Yeah, and to
Yeah.
come in and be not Trump. Everybody loves The Rock. Apparently he says this is hearsay for me, so it's from his mouth. He says The Rock's been wanting to be the president for 20 years. And then you're like, okay, I don't know where you got that information, but okay. And it's just like he said this would be the play. Because it's pretty much a sacrifice year. You bring in someone who's just going to get votes on popularity alone. Because
Mhm.
everybody loves The Rock. I love The Rock, and I'm not even a Democrat. It's just everybody loves The Rock, and he can come in and be not Trump, and that would be the play. And he thinks that's what Obama was trying to do for a long time, but it just wasn't working out.
Mhm.
Apparently, even The Rock is like, no, no, this is not a good time. And yeah, it's
My supposition all along was that they would go with they would stick with Kamala because they had to, partly from what you say of there's just not enough time to get someone else into the national stage and get enough hype for to make a real challenge, but also partly because um yeah, BLM is going, hey, wait a minute, but there are plenty of other people saying it better be Kamala or you're racist and we're leaving you.
mhm.
So there is a big
which
chunk of the women of color people that say, don't you dare pass over her. It's her turn.
which realistically, Trump has he has his monologue here. He needs to go out in the first debate stage and say, this is not plagiarism because she gave me permission. And then just read Tulsi Gabbard's speech from the time she knocked out Kamala in the primaries,
They should be
verbatim, and just
they
be
should
like,
just be
this
running
is not
clips of that as
plagiarism
their yeah.
because she gave me permission to do this and it's still relevant right now. You call
Yeah.
yourself the prosecutor, candidate. Well, let's look at your prosecution record and just read it verbatim. Don't fix what ain't broke. Do it in your voice and your
Mm.
comedy, and he's got the formula. Now her VP pick is the wild card here. Does she do something like I talked about with celebrity, or is this going to be a counter JD Vance kind of thing? Are you strategic? Because that's why they waited till now. They wanted to know who his VP was before they got rid of Biden. That's one of the major players. Two things where they held on to Biden for so long: keep RFK out of it and know who Trump's VP was. Those are the only two things. Because they're
Well, and don't forget Jill and Hunter behind the scenes trying to negotiate a good exit deal as
mhm,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, don't forget that part. But for my still my thoughts on this whole issue right now, my still biggest two takeaways for the whole political mess as far as the race goes is one, again, who's actually running the country and who has been running the country. That kind of matters. And two, I don't remember who I saw post this the other day of I believe the rally was on a weekend. So are we just now 2 weeks past the attempted assassination of Donald Trump? It's only been like two
Yeah, it was a
weeks.
Saturday. So
And
we're 2 weeks in a day.
so we're just 15 days past that, and already the media has tried to get us to move on like 10 different times. So hold on a second. Um, Now personally, I have complete and total faith that the FBI is crossing the T's and dotting all the lowercase J's, and we are going to get that report answering all the questions any minute now. In fact, I suspect it's going to come out in a couple of days, right after the report from the Las Vegas shooter.
Yeah, no, no. There's actually they're quietly rolling stuff out because Christopher Wray's on TV saying, well, we don't know what the bullet did. And then the white papers come out that it was the bullet that hit his ear.
Mhm.
So it's the public versus what is actually being reported. And, you know, you just can't. The PR machine is part of the problem. And the fact that the media is running it is
Mhm.
the problem. Because without that, if we had a media that was what journalism should be, not a single we wouldn't have a purpose doing these shows because it would already be done.
Yeah.
It would already be done. You know, Tim Pool would not have a job. Dace would not have a job. You know, Glenn Beck would not have a job, or he'd still be back with mainstream media. None of these things that exist now. Joe Rogan wouldn't have a job. He'd be talking about mixed martial arts and the lost city of Atlantis every week, right?
God, that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
well,
I
yeah,
want those
we
shows.
long for the day, you
Yeah.
know, we long for the day where we don't have to do this kind of stupid shit, you know? But we're here because it's not being done. But it's still there.
Mhm.
You know, the white papers say the FBI says that it was actually a bullet that hit his ear. But Christopher Wray, the face of the FBI on TV, is still saying, well, it could have been shrapnel from a teleprompter
You
or
know, and
something.
without like it freaking matters.
Yeah,
It
there's
was
still
that
bullets
close to his
flying.
head.
There's still bullets flying in his general direction.
I don't remember who I was listening to. I think it was the Unsubscribed podcast where somebody made the point, and again, these are almost all of them are combat veterans. That what the hell does that matter? One of them literally said, "Yeah, this is pretty much an exact quote. I've literally seen shrapnel do more damage to guys than bullets."
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, the what was the shooter doing there? What was his intention and how he did it? And why was Trump left so exposed? Those are the questions that matter.
Well, they did find that he possibly did have a social media presence on Gab, which is apparently a conservative social media network, but he was on Gab defending Biden on everything. And so it's like, well, there you go. You know what?
Did I say this while we were recording or not? That Dan Bongino has a theory that he has
Yes.
heard from people within the investigation
Yeah.
that, and I think that should be reiterated because my whole point when we talked about it was, you know, if they can do this to Trump, they already are doing it to you. And it is quite possible that what this guy was trying to do was target you. You know, Trump is just an avatar for you. And that matters. That hate that is being spewed when you call someone literally Hitler and you call his supporters literal Nazis, you should not be surprised if some lunatic, somebody who's already on the edge of this kid ain't right, goes out to change the world because it's not murder if it's Nazis, it's war. It is a justified killing if you're killing actual Nazis.
Well, it's what they call it stochastic terrorism, right?
So
Let's see. I'm trying to
those are the
find.
questions that should be being asked, but you can't ask those questions in the mainstream media because you're guilty. You know, I showed some of the was it the day show I stole from to show their montage of mainstream media figures who make multi millions of dollars a year calling the guy a Nazi, saying he's quoting from Mein Kampf. What do you know, it's nonsense. And now you're surprised that potentially, theoretically, possibly someone went to create a mass casualty event at a Trump rally because those are bad. I mean, hell, for all we know, maybe that's why we never found out about the Vegas shooter's motives because it was a country music festival. So maybe he figured these are all MAGA people, so they deserve to die.
Hmm.
I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows because the FBI won't say squat. And maybe that's why. Oy, it's making my headache worse, not better.
Yeah, I was looking for it. I thought Phil Bonte had posted it, but he's posting so much stuff now because he's starting his tour with Megadeth, which is awesome. Uh, but it was this is stochastic terrorism, and it has a picture of Trump, and there's a thing going like this, and it goes back and forth every time the thing goes over, like a pendulum,
Mm.
to Hitler's face. and then comes back.
Hmm.
And it was like, yeah, that's it, they're still doing it. It's still the same thing,
Hmm.
which I hate to break it to everybody, but Hitler took control of government and used it to extend its powers and lots of things that didn't happen in those 4 years, uh, but did happen a lot in the 4 years after that. So projection, confession through projection, I guess. But yeah, yeah. As I was flipping through that looking for it, God, we haven't even talked about the freaking opening ceremonies for the Olympics. It's which realistically, come on, America. Uh, okay, so this is easy for me to say, but I actually 100% say I would be able to do this. I would have walked out as an athlete. I would have got a plane ticket and gone home. Hey, you want to bring selfish intentions? I'd be
I
more
don't know that
famous
I
for
would have
that than
gone
anything
home,
else.
but yeah, I'm get up and walk out of that.
Hmm.
Make a scene, use your platform as an athlete of I'm going to go out and do my damnedest to win a gold medal now so that I have a microphone in my face and I can talk about how disgusting this was, not just to me personally, but to a giant chunk of the world. 1 point something billion people, I think, profess to be Christian.
I thought it was 2.4 billion is what the
Okay.
number that's coming out, but
Okay. The numbers I remember from years ago was 1 point something million. So
billion.
billion, big difference. Yeah.
One point
And
something
and
million would be like less than a percent of the United States.
I saw an article about the choreographer, the director of the opening and closing ceremonies, talking about how he's queer and he wanted everyone to feel included. You could have had everyone feel included and not be blatantly sacrilegious, and that is the appropriate term for what that was. Okay, you would not do that with Muhammad and his child bride, and you damn well know you wouldn't, because someone would kill you in the street.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of people in the independent squares. I don't know what the conservatives are doing now, but they're calling out a lot of the more lefty pundits that are like, "Oh, I can't believe you're so offended by this." And they're like, "Okay, well, you know what? Poole is a good example, and Poole isn't the only person I listen to or talk but he's got an industry now. He is an industry right now, and he's a brilliant businessman. So he's got millions of dollars to throw behind his statements, and
Mm-hmm.
he offered to put up a certain amount of money to recreate something, but using Muhammad instead of Christianity. And he keeps putting that to everybody that puts out there, and he will do what he says. And you got to respect that because he's a person just like any of us. He can be killed just like any of us. I
To
saw
his
a video
credit,
where someone pulled his beanie off and he was caught completely unawares. He's human just like all of us.
to
But
his credit, I don't listen to him anymore. I'll go, maybe I'll sometime later when it's not a tangent, I'll go into the reasons. But to his credit, Steven Crowder actually did that. He did a skit where he was Bob Ross painting Muhammad.
mm,
And it was after the Charlie Hebdo stuff. So it was after, again, in France, it was after some lunatic went into a magazine publisher and shot up the place because they had a political cartoon that featured a cartoon of Muhammad. And so Steven Crowder said, I'm your Huckleberry. And he did a skit where he was Bob Ross painting Muhammad and his child bride. And don't like the guy anymore, but the guy's got stones. So kudos to you. All right. Are we done with that particular
well, I
bit of
thought that you might
potpourri?
be able to segue if I brought up the Paris thing, and then you
Well,
were talking about Christians. So
this
I'd
is
give you one to defend them, and then attack
all right.
conservatives. Yeah.
Well, th- it should not be surprising, okay, at all. Um, because Europe is a godless place. Western Europe primarily, not interestingly, the former Eastern Bloc, not as much. That where you see more thriving Christian communities, you're in Poland and the Czech Republic and Slovakia and Hungary, the former Eastern Bloc, where that was suppressed. The Western Europe, and this was a surprise to me as a teenager living in Europe, thinking, you know, this is the birthplace of Catholicism, of Protestantism, the Reformation, the grand cathedrals. The grand cathedrals are just tourist attractions now. They're nothing. They're absolutely no different than the Colosseum or the Parthenon or etc. And I don't know if you have noticed this or experienced this, traveling to visit the in-laws, but it is not a where we grew up in South Texas is way more churchy than the birthplace of the church.
Uh, I, I might disagree there because having traveled to all these, because I'm not a Christian, but I love the architecture.
Mhm,
And I mean, what do you go see when you go to the old world? Is most of the architecture revolves around the especially the Catholic Church, but in Germany, a lot of the Protestant after Martin
mhm,
Luther and everything. But in Bamberg, where we were, we go most frequently. It's the only pope to be buried outside of Rome,
mm,
and so you can go see that, and but you can only kind of go see it. And this is where I'll disagree with you: is you can only kind of go see it. You go and you see the architecture, but you're not allowed all the way in
mm,
unless you're there to worship.
mm,
And so they do still separate those two things. If you're there to worship or if you're there as a tourist, yes, they allow you to be in awe of this, which is actually, I think, a Christian message is go ahead and be in awe of this. That's why they made the vaulted ceilings to
mhm,
give you a sense of awe when you walked in, right? But at the same time, we still want to worship here, and you don't disturb that. So there is a separation with that kind of stuff. A little less so when I was in the missions in Mexico just recently. Still beautiful, but they did say if there's something going on, don't go in there.
yeah.
But at the same time, other than that, come in and see. But I think that actually it might not be 100% contradictory to your message, but at the same time, part of the Christian message is spreading the sense of awe. And it's like the why buy a Lamborghini and leave it in the garage, right? You have it so people can see. And that's what they wanted. They wanted you to be inspired by it as a normal human being, and maybe that would bring you closer to the
Mhm.
church. Uh,
What I mean by godless, though, that's a good point, and I should define that. Okay, because if you just look at surface level polling, it doesn't seem godless. It doesn't seem that different than the US. But a lot of that surface level polling is, what do you identify as? Are you atheist, agnostic, Christian, Catholic, Protestant? These labels. And so you'll get a high return on people who says, "Oh, I'm a Christian." But then what you have to look at is, do they ask follow-up questions? And the big one being, how often do you attend services? And the numbers for regular attendance, and depending on the poll, that is usually defined, regular is usually defined as more than once a month, which even that's not all that much. And we have, like I said, the little town in South Texas where we grew up, there were debates on whether or not you should have Little League on Wednesday night because so many people had Wednesday night church services
mhm.
because Sunday wasn't enough. um but
Yeah,
if you look at,
what was it? Wednesday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah, and then since it's South Texas, there's a fairly significant Catholic population as opposed to the rest of the other parts of the nation. So then you would have Friday stuff or Saturday mass or whatever. Anyway, but that was something that people knew they had to work around. If it was a club, if it was an athletic event, if it was a whatever, there were enough people that attended regularly that you had to work around these things. And when you look at the polling of specific beliefs as
Hold
well
on just
as
a second.
actual attendance, then there is a significant difference between Europe and the US. And I'm using that because we're US here, but you can also look at other parts of the world. Like one of the places where the Christian church is actually thriving the most is in China, where it's the most oppressed, because I mean, historically, that's how Christianity works. But anyway, so the point I'm making, and this actually came to mind a couple weeks ago when our own politics got pushed out of the way, but with the European elections,
Hmm.
because my contention is what you are seeing politically is a direct line from the fall of Christianity. So, for instance, in France, where you just had these lovely opening ceremonies, you have the right, the establishment right, aligned itself with literal communists rather than let reformist right, or, actual right rather than establishment right, politicians come to power. Le Pen, her party got the most votes, but because it's a parliamentary system, she didn't get the presidency or prime minister. I can't remember how France does it. It's this weird mix of parliamentary and congressional system. But the reason they didn't get enough seats to get a majority and create a government is because the establishment right, the former guy, whose name I'm blanking on, uh, his party, where they saw they couldn't win, they pulled their candidates out because they would rather the far leftist, I'm not kidding, literal communists, the Communist Party of France won a bunch of seats because the establishment right pulled their candidates out and threw their support behind the left because they would rather literal communists than people who don't just say they're on the right, but are actually going to implement policies along those lines. And to me, that is a sign. That is because of their godlessness. That is because their principles have become untethered to their goal from their goals. And we're
See,
actually backwards here. We're actually at the end of my notes talking about Lawrence Southern and
well,
Peterson and Mary Harrington here.
yeah, I don't, I hesitate to put godlessness on that, obviously, because I'm the godless one of us. But it's, I think what we're seeing more and more of is the fact that when we talk right and left, it was actually elite versus populist. Because if you're a communist authoritarian government or you're an oligarchical authoritarian government, you're still an authoritarian government,
Mm-hmm.
and the elites are still in power.
Well, see, that's what it has become now, and that's pretty recent. Now I
I
would
think it's just
say
becoming evident
it's becoming
recently.
more evident now.
Yeah.
I would say it really started to happen in the 90s, where that started to happen, but the language didn't change until much more recently. Because before that, I would say the divide wasn't, you know, what was it you said, populist versus authoritarian?
Elitist,
Elitist,
yeah, yeah.
elitist. Okay. Before that, it was communal versus individualistic. And that's where the right kind of went off the rails at times, because communal doesn't necessarily mean communistic, but it does mean communal. And that is why the political wonks have written books on the subject of why are urban areas more blue. Well, because they're more communal, because they have to be, because you're living that close to other people, you have to be more communal.
Yeah, well, you were dependent on so many different people because it separates the skill sets so much.
Mm-hmm.
When you have property and when you have land and animals and family and all of these other things, you are more self-sufficient.
Yeah.
But if you've got a 500 square foot block of a home, there's only so much you can do with that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be dependent on your grocery store. You have to be dependent on the convenience store. You have to be dependent on the power company
Mm-hmm.
and the gas company. And your neighbor to make sure you're safe because everybody's so packed together. So all of these things, you're dependent, and
So the
that makes you more
reason we were
communal.
able
Yeah.
to exist as a nation with significant political divides is because we all generally agreed on basic principles like the Bill of Rights. We can disagree on how to interpret that, on how to apply that, but we all agree that these are good and noble principles that we should all uphold and adhere
But
to.
back to your point on the urban situation versus the rural is there's a lot of situations in an urban environment that the Bill of Rights doesn't help you at all because you can say whatever you want, freedom of speech, but you're still dependent on so many different things. And when you're dependent on things, you make
So,
concessions
so the
for that
person there is
dependency.
going to
Yeah.
lean more towards the communal in
Hmm.
policy and politics because that's what they're used to, as well as to a certain degree, that's what they want or they would leave.
Hmm.
And then vice versa on the more rural or suburban,
Well, I
the
think part of the
suburbs are
problem is
kind of in
so
the
many
middle there.
people don't feel like they can leave. There's so many people in an urban environment that just don't feel
Hmm.
like they can get out of it.
Well,
And
that's a tangent for another
yeah. Well,
time,
yeah,
but
I'm just putting that in there as a let's understand people in this argument versus just separating things.
yes, that's a
Now,
good point.
no, when you talk about policy, that is something I think is not discussed enough, which is what environment are you in? It's not we prefer this in this place and we prefer this in that place. Is the people in charge? So you're say you're a governor of a state, right? Well, in a state you have cities and you have rural areas. Well, why not separate policy? This is what we do in this urban area because these are the people there, and
That's
this is
why
the
we're supposed
situation
to
they're
have a
in.
federal system with
Yeah,
layers of power and layers of authority.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, but even there, you have to understand that, because again, you're the governor of Rhode Island. Well, let's just pick the smallest governorship you can have, Rhode Island, right? You still have Providence versus the rural areas, right?
Hmm.
You have to be able to compartmentalize what you do with your policy. But we see so many times the governor says, I have the power now over the state. So everything should be this way in this state. Same with the federal government. Biden says, I have the power over this government. Keystone Pipeline out. Well, Keystone Pipeline out. Well, now I'm a Texan. What am I doing? Right? We thrive on energy production. You just turn Texas against you,
Hmm.
which is not a good thing to do, by the way.
Hmm.
But then someone else gets in power and they say Keystone Pipeline on and this and this and this and this. Well, now you're downtown LA and you're sucking in smog. Well, what do we do there, right?
So something I have noticed, and people with bigger platforms and more brains than me have talked about this, is one of the concerns about the new right is that it is a godless right, and that the godless right is rising to oppose the godless left. That's a problem because and now obviously my primary concern is because that's wrong with the capital W, because God and godliness is right with a capital R. It is objective truth. The problem is that isn't just that, but then secondarily from a more secular framework is what is what Nietzsche said. If you kill God, then something's going to replace him. You can't just have a void there. And so there has neither been the time nor seemingly the inclination to create a new objective framework, because to me that is what the US as a Christian nation meant, is that we all generally agreed that there is an objective truth above us all, above even the government, that we can argue about the details, but there is an objective truth that we call nature and nature's God, as which is to me one of the most brilliant phrases ever created by man, and it is there in our Declaration of Independence, our statement of principle, and in fact this is important to remember that for a until very recently, the mid 20th century probably, the Declaration of Independence was considered a founding document. It's not anymore. The Constitution is our founding document. No, 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 no. The Declaration of Independence needs to be looked at as the preamble to the Constitution. And that matters because that establishes the authority upon which we, the people, as the Constitution says, that is the authority upon which we create this more perfect union. And now we have thrown all that out. And so now the godless right is trying to figure out how to argue with the godless left in a postmodernist world that says to hell with objectivism.
So many ways I can go with that. But this is where, on a secular level, I still argue for a healthy dose of nationalism. And because you're correct in the thought that you have to be thinking bigger than yourself,
Mm,
right? So you have to be thinking bigger than yourself because we're 330 million people, right, in this country.
mm,
And the question is, where's too big? Where is the point where it becomes too abstract? Because if you start with like social roles theory or psychosocial theory, you are yourself, then you have your family, then you have your local community, friends, and everything around that, and then these circles keep ever expanding.
mm,
Which is the point that it becomes too much for your mind to wrap itself around? And that I think is the bigger question. But the reality is, we are the United States of America. So where your brain can wrap around versus what is real are two different things. And I think this is everybody. This is we talked about the going back and killing Hitler in our last Wheel of Time episode. The biggest atrocity that Hitler is responsible for is the negative connotation that we have to the word nationalism,
mm,
because he did it in a way that was a certain group of people within the nation should be running everything and everybody else can be killed in a gas chamber,
mm,
right? Whereas we are a diverse group of people that all live within this border under these rules with this citizenship, and we're doing a pretty damn good job. That's healthy.
I don't think
But
I've
the
said this in a
same word is used for both.
I don't think I've said this in a while, so it's worth reiterating. Before he lost his ever-loving mind, and Jonah Goldberg used to be one of the great minds of the right, and then he got TDS so hard he has Sam Harrison himself. Um, but early on, with all this talk of nationalism and populism, I liked the way he talked about nationalism, which is that nationalism is like salt. If you have none, you have nothing. I mean, you're eating sawdust.
Mm-hmm.
You the salt is what brings out the flavor. That's why you put a bit of salt even in desserts
Well, it also
because
helps
you
your heart regulate its beat and all that stuff. But
yeah. But when you're just talking about the flavor of food, that that's the main reason why restaurant food tastes better than your home food most of the time is because they have mastered salt. They have mastered just enough to bring out those flavors and make something taste really good. But this is where he continues the analogy. So you have none and you're eating sawdust. You have it just right and that meal is perfect. You have too much and it's literal poison. Well, you have too much and it's unedible. You keep going and it's literal poison. You can poison yourself with enough salt. So I loved that analogy of nationalism is you've got to have some. You've got to have some or you don't have a nation.
mm-hmm.
You've got to have some or you don't have a people. But you got to be careful you don't go overboard or it's literal poison to your for everyone who's not us in the gas chamber
Mm-hmm.
point.
Yeah, and again, where does your expanding of the circle become too abstract for you? I would happily take a bullet for my son, right?
Mm. You know,
You
you
know,
almost went off a cliff for him.
yeah, I
Yeah.
almost did. Yeah, so I did almost go off a cliff for him. But, I also had a gun in my face over a dog because
Forgot
I
about that.
I didn't want this guy to like I wouldn't he was offering his dog to fight my dog and I told him no. And I said, "But we could fight." And he pulled a gun on me, right? And but where at what point is that circle too abstract for you? Because yeah, it was a dog, but it was my dog.
Mhm.
And you know how much I love my Wallace. He's my favorite dog ever still, even though Hamilton's coming close. But is a sense a little bit of something that everybody thinks is negative, which is nationalism, is actually a good thing. Because if not, just to your point of if there's no God, then something else is going to take over. Then some other bit of tribalism is going to take over. Whether that's family, whether that's skin color, whether that's religion,
Mm,
whether that's political affiliation. If you don't have at least a sense of, well, we're both American, then one of those other things is going to take over.
mhm.
And it's so fickle and weak that the other way around works too. I've talked about this before, implicit bias test. Okay, so blackface makes you more triggered than whiteface. Okay, because you're a white person. But then you put a baseball cap on them. And it's already overpowered because person who likes other team is
Mm,
already worse, no matter what their color is.
yeah,
So we need to harness this thing if we're being responsible. People are harnessing it, but not in a responsible way. We need to harness this if we're being responsible to say, "Hey, we're Team USA." This is the biggest, this is the number one reason why I don't count the Trump camp out is because at the base of their message, that's it. We're Team USA. And that's something I can get behind, even if I hate the people involved. Whereas on the other side, it's, oh, well, we're team, you're complicit in this, and you have this bias, and this, da, 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 and you're a horrible person, and this person's a horrible person. Da, da. That's a very negative message, just in and of itself, and I can't get behind that.
yeah,
You know, which I'm glad we have RFK because we're also Americans. So this is the most exciting election period that I've ever had because of that third party. But
yeah, yeah. Um,
so tie this all back in. We went on a
yeah.
tangent. Yeah.
So, like I said, we ended up at the end of my notes here. Um, because the point about the godless right rising against the godless left, that comes from a very particular place from that Lauren Southern interview. Okay. And here's the problem with this, you
Kind of
know,
set it up because not everybody would have, if anybody's gone this far, have listened to
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So Lauren Southern is a name I knew more than a person I knew because I never really followed her work. I heard her mentioned by other people. I kind of knew some of the stuff she did. I knew and was reminded in this interview with the Triggernometry people that probably the main place she came to prominence was some years back when the flood of refugees from North Africa and the Middle East were boating over into Europe. And Europeans were being told, you're a terrible racist if you don't accept these people. But these floods of refugees, one, a lot of them weren't refugees. They were just they were just migrants. Your regular old migrant looking for an economic better life, right? And so that part of the story, the narrative was already wrong. But then you actually go to where these people are being housed, the communities they're impacting, and they're having serious harm. And that wasn't being told. And she was telling these stories, letting the people there speak for themselves and say, here's what's actually going on in these communities. So that's one of the places where she rose to prominence. Um, and she was I would put her as part of the new right, not just philosophically, but because she was so young and she was talking about the things that the new right, the proto Trump and then Trump movement cared about, which was nationalism and unchecked immigration and all these things. And she talks about how, as part of this, she um she became caught up in this trad culture, which, that in and of itself sounds like, it seems like a dumb thing to get hung up on, but I actually think it matters. The fact that you have a buzzword because you can't just call it traditional, which is that, yeah, no, that stuff was still uncool, but the world is going to hell. The world is falling apart. So maybe that traditional stuff had something going for it. So we need to bring that back. The problem,
I'm trying to remember who said this, but someone said traditions are just fads that stood the test of time.
it sounds like someone paraphrasing Chesterton. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah. So yeah, I'm really racking my brain who I heard that from. I'm probably wanting to say I heard it. I'm quoting Williamson, quoting somebody else. That would probably be the most
Mm.
likely, but it's yeah.
Sounds like something he would say, either quoting someone else or say
Well,
himself.
his pod is modern wisdom for a reason
Yeah.
because it's. I
Hmm.
mean, it's a fast pack. It's a fast track to wisdom if anybody is just new to the game, but with a fantastic British accent that we don't
Yes.
have. Yeah.
The problem with that movement that becomes revealed as she talks about her personal life these last few years is that there was not a recognition, or frankly even a curiosity to why those traditions worked, why those traditions mattered, why those traditions led to millennia of human growth and flourishing. And this is revealed as she talks about the fact that she was separated and then divorced for years before she finally admitted it publicly,
Yeah.
because she was concerned there would be so much backlash within this world, this new right world, if well, how dare you exemplified and promoted this trad lifestyle, that you were this great trad wife, and now you're separated and divorced. um
So from personal experience, and this actually fast tracked my first divorce. Well, my only divorce, the divorce from my first wife, was we held on for like 4 years after things got bad because we were
mm,
trying to figure out what we could do, you know, and we both were stubborn about that, but we had an argument near the end, and one of the things that was said by my partner at the time was, I will be damaged goods. I can't go back to this church. They will know I won't ever get married again and da 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 da. And
it's a
that to
big
me,
effing deal to women, as we talk about that when we talk about sex differences
but
in
it was specifically
relationship.
around
Yeah.
the Southern Baptist faith
Mhm.
that she was part of. And to her, that was a big effing deal in I have to hold on to this thing.
Mhm.
But to me, it actually became a big effing deal of this isn't about us anymore. This is about your place in a specific society. And when it became about that, I completely was done because what I thought of as marriage was between me and her. When she was in a space where it wasn't about me and her, it was about her and the church. And I think that's where you're going with the Southern thing because she hid that because it wasn't about her relationship with this abusive guy.
Mhm.
And if everything she's saying is true about that story, he was hella abusive. And but it wasn't about her and him, it was about her and her relationship with public.
Yeah,
With yeah.
and specifically, I think the thing that jumps out the most there, when you look at abusive, manipulative behavior, is one of the last straws for her was when she found a list in his desk of names of
Mm-hmm.
media
No, he
people and
showed her.
influencers. Oh, he showed her. Okay, I thought
Yeah,
she
he
found it.
showed her and held it over her. I
Yeah,
am going to use this on you.
these are
Yeah.
people on your side that I know how to get in contact with. And if you leave me, I'm going to make sure they all know that you're a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make and
Well,
again, this is
and you
just from
do
her
see
side of the
this.
story,
Yeah,
but apparently he did do that after they separated. That he did try to shop around this story and get other righty type influencers and podcasters and whatnots to talk about the fall of their relationship, and his accusation was that she cheated on me, she left me, etc., and so forth.
which is funny because it's a very feminine abusive tactic that he used. Reputation damage, right? He didn't use physical force, which is usually the case with men. And I actually see this in suburbia a lot. That you hear anytime I hear something about a guy when a divorce is involved, I always look at it sideways nowadays because the female involved in suburbia has been creating a list for years to use as a weapon on her
Mm-hmm.
way out the door because she initiated the divorce. And this is what actually bugged me about that interview is because she started throwing out statistics about men getting custody and da 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 da. Those were very skewed. That was very skewed data because 92% of the time it's settled outside of court between the mother and the father.
Mm-hmm.
The 8% of the time she is uh referencing in that she says, "Oh, well most times the guy
I
gets
believe the
the
word she
custody."
used was contested, which was a red flag to me of wait a minute, what
Yeah,
does
yeah.
that mean?
Only 8% are contested. And the contested ones are probably because those 8% of the times is because you have a severely abusive mother. Something that gets the guy to say, "Oh, that's not a good mom."
Mm-hmm.
Whereas most times when you have a divorce, the man is still saying, "Well, she's still mother." And they're actually convinced outside of court. I did a lot of digging on this after I was listening to that. Most times the divorce lawyer convinces the man to not even try. And so if you look at those two things, okay, so just people think nurturing in general. So there's already a percentage chunk pushed to mother. And then there's the divorce lawyers convincing the guy not even try. And then the 8% of guys who actually try are left. I bet you those are extreme cases
Mm-hmm.
where the guy is like, no, she burns him with cigarettes. I need my son. That
Mm-hmm.
kind of situation. So, yeah, you're going to have a higher percentage. It's very skewed data. And even where she got her numbers
Or
was
I've got
Huffington
enough.
Post, by the way.
I've
Huffington
oh
Post was her
yeah, yeah,
source,
geez.
and where those numbers actually included the guys that don't try. So,
Um, that made me go, but uh, I didn't go diving into the data like you did because what was more pertinent to me was something that she doesn't seem to have considered. Certainly didn't talk about in this interview, and you know, uh, on the off chance that there's any crossover between our audience of a couple dozen at best and hers of hundreds of thousands, I I would want to ask her, why did you want the traditional route of, and you know, should set up a little more here that part of that trad lifestyle is you get married young, you start your family young, you find your partner, you get married, you start having kids, and that the woman primarily supports the man in his career endeavors. Okay, and she wasn't doing that, which made her a bad trad wife. So set that aside for the moment. The more, rather than those details, the more pertinent point, the more pertinent question is why, for you and then for your former husband. Why did you want this lifestyle? Why did you want this life? Because from her, from everything she said, it all comes from a religious point, a religious background of this is the religiously traditional way to have a life. This is what you do. Okay. What about from him? Because I got the impression this was me inferring and reading between the lines, and I'd like to know. I got the impression he was not or was not as much religious as she was. And that matters because there is a difference, a big difference sometimes between goals and principles. You can have the same goals and have entirely different principles. I remind you that the USSR was an ally during World War II. Those are vastly different principles from what was going on in the UK and the US, right? But they still had the same goal. That marriage did not last long, though, after that goal was met. After Germany was defeated, that marriage fell apart real fast and got real ugly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the question that needs to be asked by people who are promoting the traditional lifestyle when it comes to relationship is why? Because there was a reason. It wasn't just because God said so. There was a reason that that was the way you did things.
Well, why is always the most important question with everything,
Mm-hmm.
because it keeps you out of the trap of going through the motions. So you say trad wife, okay, it should be XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you never ask why XYZ, then XYZ might not fit the situation, which is what she was in. She was a budding journalist. She was doing all of these other things other than sitting there and being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. Uh, so if you never understood why, then you're going to end up in that trap because you're just going to do the things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you always ask why, if you say, "Oh, why am I exercising?" Well, I need increased muscle mass because I don't want to have sarcopenia when I get older, bone density, increased lung capacity, cardiovascular endurance, flexibility as I get older. Okay, so I just answered all of those questions by asking why.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go out and just do X, Y, if I just go out and say, I need to exercise, I'm going to get a completely different result because I don't understand why I'm doing it. I may get lucky, but for the most part, I might end up wrecking my body.
Just go for a jog and then your knees are wrecked. Well, why? Because nobody bothered to tell you and you didn't bother to think through why am I going for a jog?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's there's a great analogy for this. And it's okay, well, that person was told to go for a jog because they want to get better at running, because they want to run a half marathon. You are obese and you just want to be healthy. So you don't need not only do you not need to do that, but in your shape, you shouldn't do that.
Well, and okay, so let's go back to marriage. Why is pair bonding important for humans? Well, if you don't have a child that's listening to this right now, kids are pretty sucky at life right out of the womb for quite a long time.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a while for them to be good at being life in general in the earth, in our universe. So pair bonding is important because now you have two people to give care, one that
Mm-hmm.
can give nurturing and one that can provide. So yeah, the now you've answered the why. Okay. So if that's not part of the equation, you've got to figure out another why. If you're just together and you don't have kids and you're not making kids and you don't plan to have kids, what's your why?
Mm-hmm.
What is your why?
For
If you can't answer that, that's not going to work.
I don't
It's
know
not going to
about
work.
this guy because it's, she was very kind of careful and circumspect in how
Mhm.
she talked, and I got the impression that there's there's still some residual feeling there, which makes sense because you don't get married to someone if you don't give a dang, you know. So also maybe just some respect for the father of my child. Uh, but from a lot of the memes and posts and things I've seen on this, it's quite possible that from his perspective, his why was this is how I show I'm a masculine man. Okay, well that's not even
Which,
remotely aligned with what your principles seem to
well,
be.
and that's in line with where it became abusive too, though, because it ceased to be about something real and seemed and became something of a self esteem narcissistic kind of personality, and
Uh-huh.
there's a little bit of sadism in there too. So the things that drove this person weren't in line with good relationship. They were in
Yes.
line with his own feelings, which is very selfish, right? So that's when it becomes abusive. We talk about corporal punishment with your children versus abuse. Was it to correct the behavior or was it because you wanted to do it?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
usually the line, right? And yeah, so the big thing is what is the why? And the why has to be something that's in sync with positive pair bonding behaviors.
Hmm.
So we're going to raise children. Well, as the husband, I need to know that it's my child, right? That's the source of male jealousy, right? So I need to know it's my child. So even a little bit of possessiveness is okay at that moment. Okay, it is my child. Well, I need to know it's going to survive. I'm going just from I'm giving the masculine side of this without the feminine. Uh, so I need to know it's my child. Now I need to know the child is going to survive. So I'm going to fill in the blanks when it comes to resources that you can't do as a mother because you're spending time nurturing that child,
Hmm.
right? So I'm going to spend that time. Okay, well, it takes a long time, and these days it's getting longer and longer. They're like 25 years old before you let go of the apron strings anymore. But
Hmm.
so that's longer and longer and longer. And I need to know that you're not going to basically cuck me with another guy as I'm in that process. So that's from the male perspective. And the female perspective is basically the inverse of all that, right? I need to know you're not going to leave while I'm in this desperate situation.
Hmm.
I need to know that you're not going to create offspring with somebody else that's going to take away resources. So there's the cheating, the jealousy aspect. Uh, I need to know that you're going to be here through the entire process. So those things are the whys, and how did that fit? And when you talk trad, so I'm circling this back in. When you talk trad, a lot of traditions are habits that stood the test of time. The traditional male-female relationship in a family with children is accounts for all those things. And anything outside of those things is just customs. Is just it is just social pressures. Everything outside of those things is social pressures. But the core of it all is the things that we think of traditional, they address those issues.
Hmm. And what one of the things that came up in her conversation is something that you just brought up, talking about your first marriage, which made me feel for her on a personal emotional level, because it does matter, which is this idea that, well, I'm damaged goods now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
and actually she did use those words, damaged
yeah,
goods. Yeah.
that so it's not just that I've been married before, but now you exponentially complicate that with your single mother.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to significantly
Yeah.
reduce your
Get us
um
canceled. Mate value goes,
the
yeah.
the uh what's the word, the population of single men who are now available to you is significantly reduced, because it takes a certain kind of man in. And this is why a lot of times I'm actually curious about the statistics of this, because but certainly anecdotally, second marriages or subsequent marriages are often blended families because you're in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
because well, I've had a previous marriage or marriages and I've got kids. Well, I also have previous marriages and have kids. So we can get past that point because we're both in the same boat. Now, personally, Lauren, I think you are still very bangable. So just want to throw that out there. Maybe that can be the title of our episode. Lauren Southern is still bangable.
Well, I brought up
Okay.
AOC earlier. I'd still do.
Well,
Yeah. I like me a little
Lauren
Latina,
has the bonus of not having the crazy eyes. So
but
she's
that,
got
I
that.
kind of like that a little bit.
You like the danger.
Yes.
But that does matter, and that's why your story matters, and that is why figuring out the principles that lead you to the goals matter, because as we have said repeatedly, and you've gone into the evolutionary mumbo jumbo about this, yeah, it matters more for women that your mate value does go down, and so you need to be extra rigorous in deciding on that first partner to try and make sure that that is your only partner, because it's going to matter to you a hell of a lot more than it will to him. And that is kind of where this ties into the Jordan Peterson interviewing Mary Harrington, which I thought was kind of fortuitous timing, because one of the things Harrington says that we have heard before and said before, which was stop getting simplistic marriage advice from the internet that doesn't work in the real world. That's
Stop getting
essentially what happened.
stop getting any advice from the internet that doesn't work in the
Uh,
real world.
well, the simplistic part is what made my ears perk up as I was listening to when Harrington said that, because that's why it doesn't work, because we are no longer conveying. It's one thing if you have a blog where someone has thought through an argument and is making points, or if you have a long form interview with two, intellectual people like, PhD published author Jordan Peterson. I believe Harrington also is a PhD, as well as,
Yeah, but I think in
multiple.
journalism though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she also has published multiple books and articles and whatnot. So these are people who have read extensively and thought deeply on these topics, as opposed to looking at a meme and going, yeah, that's for me. Well,
This is one of those things, and this is always ask the why. Why I need to be married for a long time, because one of these days I'm going to be at a wedding, and they're going to have that dance where everybody's out there and they keep getting couples to go off as they keep saying, and the last two out there they say, "What's your advice for staying married so long?" And the man always says, "Oh, she's always right." Ha 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 ha. Well, that's the quickest way to hold on. Let me pause this real quick. Someone's at the door. Sorry for the hiccups. Someone came by. Kid offering to wash trash cans, which I appreciate. But I had just done that earlier. So
good on you, kid.
yeah. Good on you from going door to door. Oh, okay. So as the old couple, they always say, she's always right, or something stupid like that, little one-liner. When realistically you look at the data, that's the fastest way to become not respected by your wife. So that's actually bad advice we keep getting at our weddings. Uh, I want to make it to that day one time so I can say the real answer. Be a man without being abusive.
Mm,
That's the answer. Be a man, earn the respect, but don't go over the top. Don't be Gaston. There's a reason these stories are time told, right? Gaston was the epitome of what we call toxic masculinity. Be a man like the beast. He was capable of harm, but he learned love. That's it.
it's a good point. And this is why. So one of the questions Peterson asked, he kind of got hung up on this, like he tends to, and I thought he spent a little too much time on it. And I was kind of waiting for him to kind of get it. And I'm like, well,
He
how
does
come
that
I
a
can
lot
answer?
lately.
Yeah, how come I can answer this question and you can't? You're way smarter than me. But he kept asking her why she still holds to the term feminist or feminism, and why this is a feminist project. I can't remember the title of her recent book that they were talking
Reactionary
about.
feminism.
Reactionary feminism. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So why this has to be a feminist project? And it just immediately jumped at me. And maybe it's because, like I said last time, I'm kind of obsessed with this idea because of cross-sex mind reading. Because it is a heck of a lot harder for me to convince a female of something than it is a male, unless that female has a very masculine way of thinking. Because I don't think the same way. We don't think the same way. It's like the analogy I thought of is it's like using raw stats, the raw statistics, and you've brought them up when we first started. A lot of what we were talking about was CRT DEI. So you've brought up the stats of um, police interactions with minorities. Yeah, what's going on here?
My computer's lagging. That's what's
Okay.
going on here.
Well, you can show the raw stats all you want, but if some young black man has been brainwashed his whole life and just convinced that cops are out hunting young black men, young black kids, all the raw stats in the world aren't going to change his mind unless he's just a super analytical person. You're going to have to figure out a way to make it real to that individual. And that's why there has to be this feminist component to this idea, to what Mary Harrington is doing, because she is speaking to women as a woman. She's going to be much more convincing than you or I, or even someone with the intellect of Jordan Peterson is going to be.
are we on us on the screen? Because
I'm stuck with Samuel Sear has started screen sharing still.
yeah, okay. So I need to figure out how to fix this. Let me pause this if I can, because my cursor's not even working.
Oh no.
Says
Um,
close Zoom. I don't want to
for
close Zoom.
instance, happiness.
Are are we here?
I'm here. I'm listening to you. So far
Okay,
as I can tell, we're still recording.
stop share.
There we go.
Okay. All right, we're back. Okay,
All right.
so
So let me finish this thought here,
well,
which is
no,
that
I was gonna say he keeps he actually did a full episode where one of the things he talked about with narcissistic personality disorders were in social media conversations, they always come in with their own story, or
mm,
I am this and I am that and da 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 in a completely irrelevant conversation. And one of the things he keeps doing in his recent interviews is, well, I've been working on this for my new book, and goes off on a completely different tangent on whatever to test his ideas. And I'm like, you're doing the thing that you said was a bad
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And you do it in, he completely ruined the Elon Musk interview, for instance.
I hadn't watched that one yet.
Yeah. And I'm just like,
I saw the
dude.
clip where Musk was talking about his child, and that was just heart wrenching. And I haven't had the
Yeah.
emotional fortitude to watch the whole thing yet.
Okay. So
Um,
finish your thought.
all right. So anyway, this point was really interesting to me, that uh, Peterson's point about both his experience as well as data that he has read, that it would appear that a women's neurology is not geared towards self-happiness. And this may be another way that men are cavemen, and they're very simple, is because ours is. We are very easy to satisfy. We are very easy to make happy. We want food and sex and affirmation. The end. Women, the way he put it, is women's happiness neurologically seems to be geared towards self plus another, usually a child. That is where happiness comes from for women. It's
Well,
it's it's almost never solo.
I saw one of those that was supposed to be one of those male manosphere gotchas
Mm-hmm.
on women. And it was like, oh, what's your number one red flag when dating? And the person said, oh, they externalize everything. Where, oh, when they're late, oh, so and so did this, and that's why I was late. Or, oh, you made me unhappy. They externalize everything. And my first thought wasn't, he's right. because there's a lot of truth to it. But the deeper truth is you've just eliminated almost every woman
Hmm.
because that's how they think.
Hmm.
It is something external coming in. Oh, I need the year of this where I'm going to go on all these trips and I'm going to do this and all of these things are going to make me happy. Where the guy is, all these external things are trying to take it away from me. So I'm going to go ahead and just do what I have to do to make sure the external doesn't come in. The weather, hunger, all of these other things that come in and try to destroy you. We just defend ourselves from them and we're happy. Whereas the female is like, I need to find external sources of happiness. And so this isn't, yeah, this is a general thing. And go ahead and make your greater point.
Well,
But
to
yeah.
that point, this is something that was kind of an aside. It was just something that jumped out at me that made me laugh and kind of annoyed me, which is she was talking about maternity leave, and that in the UK it is government mandated 6 months of paid maternity leave with an optional 6 additional months of unpaid leave if the woman so desires. And she said that US standards are barbarous. And I just laughed and said, well, that's why you're a feminist, because you don't want equal rights, you want special rights.
Mhm.
Because one, paternity leave is not the same. It is very new that paternity leave is even a thing. And two, you don't understand how business works, because the reason maternity leave is a big thing and why only companies of certain size will do that is because a small business owner can't do that and stay in business. But from the female point of view, well, that makes perfect sense. And how dare you require that the woman go back to work when she's literally still bleeding? Okay, well, first of all, I've had a wife who has had 2 kids, and I know that that is something of an extreme case. If you're still bleeding, you can still be uncomfortable. Things are still kind of messed up, but I think you're overstating things to make your point. But that's her focus. That's what she cares about. That's kind of the world that her mind is in. So of course she's going to think that's
Well, and
barbarous.
it's also a Western thought because real life says the world goes on.
What is it?
And
What is it that Williamson calls those ideas? The um,
oh,
pri-
it's actually Heinrich is
okay,
yeah, it's the weird societies, Western industrialized what's E? I can't remember what E is. Rich and developed.
okay.
So
Now I
so
was talking about something Williamson says about privileged ideas,
oh no, you're thinking Henderson luxury beliefs.
luxury beliefs.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
luxury beliefs.
Yeah.
I like that much better than first world problems
Yeah.
because it's so much more
No,
than
because luxury beliefs have another in indication to them is it doesn't affect you, but it hurts the people you're talking about.
hmm. Hmm.
Whereas first world problems is still about you. So I can't get enough maternity leave after 6 months is about you. That doesn't
Hmm.
affect some
Yeah.
poor person
Well,
in, Fifth Ward or something.
back to the relationships and the cross sex mind reading, and that this ties to something that was said early on in this interview when they were talking about dating. And I don't remember if this was something that this thought came from one of them or if it was my own idea that kind of spun off from what they were talking about. But um men and women date with different strategies because they have different goals. Back to where I started of the difference between goals and principles, right? Is um oh geez, what was the technical term Peterson was using? Was the R strategy versus the K strategy or something like it? Multiple partners versus a single partner that you're dedicated to.
Hmm.
Okay, that is through the animal kingdom, that is the way things work. And then you can actually look at that in the human world too, of there are going to be, the Tyreek Hills out there who've got a dozen baby mamas, and then,
Hey,
you know,
he's He's helping our replaceability.
Oh boy. Anyway,
Yeah.
but then you have those that are going to be, no, this is my woman, these are my kids, this is my focus. And it occurred to me that even if you have similar strategies, and I think you see this now, especially in the younger generation, which is I'm hip with the kids. I know the lingo, the NSA and the FWB, you know, even if you say that that's your goal as a woman, you're actually going to that is still going to come out different than a guy who wants that, because your goal, your orientation, your focus, it's going to be different because he's a male, you're a female. So you could say all you want, I'm just here for the sex, and then you end up crying afterwards. Not that that's ever happened to anyone here. Uh, but that's not a thing that a guy does, because when we say that, it's to our Wheel of Time talk, when I love that moment when Perrin is very forcefully demanding, Rand, my best friend here, bro, promise me that it won't come to a fight here. And he says, I promise. Well, okay, then that's good enough. Onward we go, because that's done with now. But because that's all that was needed, is all right, you're my best pal, you promised it, and that is that, and now we move on. That's not the way it works with the woman. In fact, you see that. It's one of the reasons Robert Jordan has to be canceled, is because when the female politicians get together, it is much more Game of Thrones backstabby, because it's coalitional, and there are shifting coalitions, and there are shifting concerns, and there are attribution of motives, and all of these things, because they're different.
Yeah, I've told you about this, just being out in, Washington Street or Midtown or whatever, and wingman in it for my boys, and just been like, oh yeah, this is nothing by the end of the night, and they get so mad at you, like y'all have been together for 3 years and you're breaking up with her, and I'm like, there's no breakup here. We weren't a thing. I was just talking to you to actually distract you while your friend would talk to my boy over there. They had already created a story. There's 10 years of relationship in their mind when it was just a conversation. But oh, where are you from? Oh, I've been there. Oh, the weather's nice today. Look at the ball game that's going on. Oh, you went to Alabama? Yeah, Alabama's winning. Okay, cool. And all of a sudden you're in a relationship in their head.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. It's completely different. And oof, the anger that comes out of that, oh my gosh, is something to be seen. I should videotape these things. It's a one record state, Texas is. I could
The
do
single
it
party
legally.
consent. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, that's all I had on that, to, you know, beat that dead horse. I almost made another comment about Lauren Southern's bangability there, but I resisted because I'm a gentleman.
She is
Your
an attractive
thoughts?
woman. No,
Yeah.
I do question a little bit just from the way she talked. I'm like, Trigger, they're great, but their name is wrong because they typically don't trigger the people they're interviewing. They go out
No.
of their way to make them comfortable.
Yeah.
And there were some things she said that I'm like, we're only getting one side of the
That needs some
story
pushback. That
here.
needs some follow up. Yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be some follow up to that. So that is, to me, is a little scary with her. At least with AOC, I know what I'm getting. With so I would like to see her in a slightly more combative interview
Yeah.
and see how defensive she gets.
Yeah.
But at the same time, no, the core of what you were saying is completely correct. The trad thing, traditional, I think, well, anytime something gets trendy, you lose sight of
Mm.
the core values of it, right? It becomes a thing that's like a template.
One of our favorite whipping boys, CrossFit.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Functional training, right? Yeah, the template is there, but it's so wrong because you can't follow the template with the individual. And we don't we yeah, the trad wife thing I think is overall a positive movement. Okay, so go to your CrossFit analogy
Mm,
just now. Getting people to exercise is a positive thing. Getting people to understand some semblance of traditional relationships is a good thing. But if we don't ask the question why, and we don't take it to the individual level, there's going to be a lot of broken bodies in the process.
mm.
And giving her the best benefit of the doubt, she's a broken body in the process.
No, that's yeah. That is actually one of the things that kind of annoyed me when it came to, okay, there needs to be some pushback here, and maybe it's because I come from kind of the same world she does, which was when she was saying, hey, you know what, it's okay, because she was talking about the being damaged goods and the what are other people going to say, what of, to your own example, what are the people at the church I go to going to think, and and then I realized, well, it's okay. It's not okay, and that matters. And you need to make that part of your story, one, for your own personal growth and your own learning and making better decisions going forward, but then also what your story can do to help other people before they get in your situation. Because it's not okay. It's
Mhm.
it's what you had to do, as we said, seemingly, one-sided, but seemingly you were in a manipulative slash abusive relationship. You had to leave. There, you were eventually left with no other choice of I I either I either leave and suffer the consequences of being a divorced single mom, or I stay and I suffer, which will ultimately lead to my child, possibly children, if you continue on in this marriage, suffering because they may not know what's going on, but kids ain't dummies. And if there's tension there between mom and dad, it's not going to be a healthy relationship. It's not going to be a healthy place for them to grow up. So
Well,
you eventually reach the point where you
especially if
had
she was
to.
honest about dad, because he would
Mm,
do the same things with the kids.
that's a good
And that's
point.
that's a part of the story we didn't get from that interview was did he use the children against mom and did mom use the children against dad? And
Mm-hmm.
this is back to our other conversation on 95% of marriage counseling is unsuccessful because they're just basically there to have a mediator in their
Mm,
reasons why they're leaving, right? But the reverse of that is marriage counselors should be like, well, it's not about you, it's about the kids. And your behavior towards each other is going to affect your kids. And I actually would like the follow-up story on this to be how are the kids doing now? Is dad using them? Is mom using them? Are they
yeah.
co-parenting very well? All of these things. It's because it's about the kids. They're our future. I don't do the best job in the world, but at least try to be a dad, you know. And there any problems me and mom have with each other are never going to leak over to child. Never, ever, ever, ever. And in fact, I take care of my niece, and her dad has many issues that I have her former father have many issues that I could really rail in and use all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I never talk negatively
Yeah.
about him in front of her. I always, oh, well, this good thing that he used to do, that was good. So follow that example. So I would try to do that. The kids don't know. They're innocent. Kids are innocent for the most part. And you have to keep them in that developmental pattern. So it's I would love to see the follow-up be about the kids and not their relationship together. But let's sake this back to everything we've talked about. This whole DNC thing is an abusive relationship to their voters. And let's stop letting that happen. It's gaslighting. It's, oh, well, dad is this and dad is that. He's great. Oh, now mom is this. Here you go. Follow mom, Kamala Harris. And if you don't, by the way, you're racist.
Mhm. The seminal moment in 1984. I mean, I've heard different people pick out different parts, but to me, the seminal moment for what Orwell was trying to say is for if for some reason you haven't read it, you need to. And the basic premise is
It's
that in the
this thick.
future,
Even I could read
yeah,
that. Come on.
in the future there are three superpowers. Basically the US UK alliance, and then the what used to be the Soviet bloc, and then I kind of inferred that there's like a Chinese bloc is the
Indian.
other.
I gathered Indian
Oh,
from that.
Indian. So
Yeah, because it was Eurasian.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, there are three major superpowers, and the world is at constant war, and it's constantly shifting who's allied with who.
And
And
remember he was British, so Indian would make sense.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But and he was writing in the 50s before the Chinese Communist Party kind of did its thing. Anyway, um, so there's this moment in the middle of the book where the UK leader is up there giving this fiery speech ranting about the enemy. And in the middle of the speech, the alliance shifts. And he, without missing a beat, just goes right into, and we have always been at war with, whoever it flipped to this time. Just so that country that used to be your ally, literally in that same speech, is now we have always been at war with. And to me, that was the seminal moment of what he was trying to say, not just because of what the speaker did, but because the crowd roars
Hmm.
in adulation and agreement.
It's like the Ash experiments, right? Where they had the different lengths of lines, and they would have actors in the panel and one person who was being studied, and the actors would say the short line was long, and the person that was being studied would say, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's the long line." And so it was a very high percentage of people that
Mm,
would agree with the crowd instead of actually stating what's real.
yeah. Stop being afraid of or ashamed of truth.
Well, that's you use the word you were use the word shame.
Mm,
Is it guilt or shame?
mm,
You feel guilty if you're lying. You feel shameful if people see you lying.
mm.
And one can be used against you, the other is on you. So,
Yeah.
no.
All right. Well, there's a good place to end it. Hopefully, our couple hours of rambling here was useful to someone in some way.
Yep. Yeah.
And then we will see y'all next time for some more Wheel of Time, which may just be two chapters, depending on how much, because there's a lot going on in the next two chapters. So we'll see how far we get.
Is it Matt next?
Nope.
Nope, Rand.
It's Rand's UN conference.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. See you
We'll
later,
see y'all for
guys.
that.